She was a king's daughter, she was a king's sister, she was a king's wife, she was a queen, and by the same title, a king also. When John White attempted to describe Mary at her funeral on the 14th of December 1558, is a testament of a man who endeavoured to describe England's first crown queen regnant. When Mary ascended the throne in 1553, she faced a constitutional first. She was the first woman to successfully inherit her father's crown. Though the politics of England's first crown queen regnant have been widely discussed, one essential part of her reign remains to be illuminated: her iconography. To cement the love of her people, Mary needed an influx of imagery. The easiest way was through portraiture and coinage. The power of iconography was used by all of England's kings. How would it evolve to mould a woman? As princess, Mary had encountered portraiture either by being the subject of it or, as this anonymous work shows, believed to be the product of Holbein, or by Lucas Horenbolt, shows Mary as a princess aged 9, a woman destined to be queen. Though when this miniature was depicted, Mary was destined to be a queen consort to her cousin Charles V. We see there's an inscription, L'Empereur. Mary is destined to be a wife to the Holy Roman Emperor. The miniature is tiny. This was not a state portrait, but one of intimacy. The image of Mary was designed to be kept close to her future spouse. However, the betrothal collapsed due to Charles's wish for an older bride and Henry's reluctance to send his only heir abroad. This treaty, dated 2 years later, dated 1527, shows Mary with another one of her betrothals, Henri, Duke of Orleans, the future Henri II. The image is not as lifelike, but Mary wears an ermine gown. Despite the numerous betrothals, Mary was still unmarried by 1544, when Master John depicted the princess. Mary's privy purse expenses records that she paid £5 for this portrait. By 28, the Queen understood the need of portraiture to showcase herself as a dutiful daughter, while her presence constantly reminded Henry VIII of the English Catholics and of the true faith. This would be the last known and accepted portrait of Mary before she became Queen after her brother's death in July 1553. The first full-length portrait of the Queen was by the Netherlandish artist Hans Juef in the winter of 1544. We know the rough date due to the Queen wearing fur. This portrait shows the Queen in a regal position. Her cloth of gold gown fills the room against a red cloth of state and a pillar of Hercules. The pillar symbolizes her strength and stability as a ruler. This portrait is Juef's equivalent to Holbein's Whitehall mural. Whereas Henry stands on his hips, stands on his hands on his hips, his codpiece showing his fertility and his wide stance dominating the room. Juef shows Mary in the same manner. Her gown parts her waist, creating a triangular notion, while her top half also shows this. Both triangles point to her womb, suggesting her fertility. The Queen places her hands by her womb, not only protecting this fertility, but drawing the eye to it immediately. This protection symbolized her motherhood, and as Queen, she was mother to her people. This portrayal of the Queen becomes more significant when we think of the timing of its creation. In the early months of 1554, Mary crushed the rebellion by the Kentishman Thomas Wyatt in his opposition to Mary's choice of groom, Charles V's son, Prince Philip of Spain. As Wyatt neared London, the council panicked, yet the Queen was steadfast and calm. She knew if Wyatt entered London, she would be sent to the Tower. Therefore, she rode to the Guildhall and gave a speech whereby she stated that, "I am your Queen, to whom at my coronation, when I was wedded to the realm and the laws of the same, the spousal ring whereof I have on my finger, which never hitherto was, nor hereafter shall be, left off. You promised your allegiance and obedience to me, and I say to you, on the word of a prince, I cannot tell how naturally the mother loveth the child, for I was never the mother of any. But certainly, if a prince and governor may as naturally and earnestly love her subjects as the mother doth love the child, then assure yourselves that I, being your lady and mistress, do as earnestly and tenderly love and favour you." The speech was a triumph, and Mary's forces arrested Wyatt. Mary had succeeded in her second military exhibition in the space of 7 months. The first, being her march towards London after Edward VI's death. As you see, this portrait is an image of a queen who would not tolerate threats. She is secure, and yet the diamond ring, her spousal ring, is on the left finger, the traditional marriage finger. This portrait shows her sincerity when she claimed she was wedded to the realm. Let us turn to the image of Mary, which is infamous when we think of England's first crowned queen. The artist Antonius More depicted Mary in 1554, and is famous for being regarded as Charles V's trophy. With Mary's marriage to Philip, England was finally under Habsburg control. However, this is not the case. This portrait offers far more readings than merely presenting Mary as a Habsburg wife. Mary is clearly married since she wears her wedding ring. Yet it's one of the few portraits I've encountered which shows her plain gold ring. The copies omit this. The ring's position is also worth discussing. It is on the traditional finger, but this is no bridal portrait in the traditional sense. Mary's first marriage, that of her kingdom, comes before any bodily marriage. Her spousal ring, the same depicted in Lewis, is on the finger underneath. If we take into account the early modern belief that the vein on this marriage finger led directly to the heart, then Mary's first marriage to her kingdom is closer to her heart. Mary is stating that her kingdom comes before any temporal happiness, and most importantly, before the whims of her husband. Mary's smile, though faint, recalls her very human nature and kindness. Thanks to Karen Hearn's work on portraying pregnancy and the date of this portrait being between November and December 1554, we know that Mary is pregnant. Mary is the vessel to restore English Catholicism. Though she looks stern, she is acting as any mother would behave to their child. They are strict, but love their child unconditionally. For Mary, she not only loves her unborn child and her husband, but she also loves her country and her subjects. This portrait is not of a Habsburg wife, but of a queen who is mother to her people. These two contemporary copies are both by More or his workshop, yet there are subtle differences with both portraits compared to the original. Both have the wedding ring omitted. This portrait is intended for an English audience who may still be somewhat uncomfortable with a Habsburg king. Moreover, the rose in the copies loses its leaf. Thus, any depiction of a thorn is removed. Mary becomes the rose without a thorn, a direct reference to her namesake, the Virgin Mary. The portrait on the right belonged to Henry Geriner, who was captain of the Queen's Guard, vice-chamberlain, and master of the household. Geriner was one of Mary's most loyal subjects. According to the family, Henry was gifted this portrait by Mary in 1557. Was this her personal copy of the portraits? This does lead one to wonder why Mary gifted this portrait and why have a copy without the wedding ring. However, if we take into account my discussion concerning US later portraits, which will be discussed shortly, perhaps this is where the answer lay. Mary has found a more significant image to showcase herself as England's queen. As queen, Mary needed to be seen. In the words of the late Elizabeth II, I have to be seen to be believed. For Mary, this not only involved her own domestic subjects, but foreign courts. There are a number of portraits in foreign collections which have been ignored by the historiography. The contemporary art historian Karel von Monder noted that More painted copies of Mary's head for members of the Golden Fleece and to Cardinal de Granville, a leading Habsburg statesman under Charles V and Philip II. Examples of these portraits can be seen in this dictat, dated 1555. Another painting of the Queen, dated post-1556, can be found in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. This portrait was commissioned by Cosimo I de' Medici and was painted by Cristofano del Altissimo and forms part of a larger collection of copied portraits gathered by the Italian Renaissance historian and biographer Paolo Giovio. What is of note is that this image seems to be the inspiration for later 18th and 19th century engravings of the Queen. A portrait which does not often get examined is found at Windsor Castle. It is inspired by More, but I would not say it is a copy since there are additions to this portrait not present in the original. Mary sits by a green and gold throne. The colouring represents her house and legitimacy. Behind her is an embroidered cloth with the initials MR, thus Maria Regina, not only telling the viewer who is being portrayed, but acknowledging her rank as queen. She wears the same purple gown and marching partlet as in the Moore portrait, but this is where the similarities end. The face is in the English fashion, with its ghostly appearance and flat two-dimensional figure, and has a sterner expression. The most interesting part of this portrait is the placing of her hands. Again, she places them by her womb, which may hint at her fertility. Yet in her hand she holds gloves and a prayer book or psalter. The gloves represent her femininity, while the prayer book her piety. The book has a ribbon in it, hinting Mary was reading the book before she was painted. Hints of her humanism. The royal collection date this portrait between 1554 to 1559, so it may have been created by an English workshop who had reference to Moore's work. Yet the painting was only recorded in the royal collection in 1851 and was said to have been brought by Queen Caroline, wife of George II. The provenance is not known. This may have been part of a set, or perhaps a number of Moore's portraits were created for families across the country to decorate their home. The inclusion of the prayer book suggests the commissioner wanted to express Mary's piety. What is noteworthy is that there is not a wedding ring on Mary's finger, and neither is the spousal ring. The omittance of the wedding ring suggests a deliberate attempt to distance the English queen from her Habsburg husband.
Ewart depicted the Queen again in around 1556 to 1557 and emphasises Mary's independence. Their letters patent Mary holds symbolises Mary's role as judge and her motherhood. Via her power, she can give away titles, lands, and deeds. All power rests with her, and no one can usurp what is divinely given. This portrait shows a secure Mary, one who will no longer tolerate threats. Her second pregnancy furthers this security. The gown in this portrait is open, furthering the idea that the Queen is pregnant. If we examine the Queen's belly, we can see it slightly enlarged. There is yet hope for a Catholic heir. Another feature of this portrait is a pattern of the gown Mary wears. She wears a similar design to the one Philip is depicted in by Titian. Mary has consciously copied her husband. Mary is imitating Philip and becoming one body with him. Could this be Mary consciously creating herself as the new Isabella Castile, while Philip acts as her Ferdinand? The Venetian ambassador to Charles V, Federico Badour, wrote to the Doge in Senate on the 16th of January 1556, explaining that Mary was now Queen of Philip's territories. The Queen could now, and I quote, style herself as the Queen of many and great crowns, and on her being no less their mistress than of her own crown of England, end quote. The phrase Badour uses is of interest. No less their mistress than of her own crown of England. This implies that Mary is far from being a mere queen consort in Philip's territories. Is this a mistake in the choice of words used, or does Badour imply that a new Isabella and Ferdinand had arrived? However, Cardinal Reginald Pole, Mary's cousin and papal legate, also held this view, for he wrote to Pope Paul IV on the 30th of March, in 1558, stating that the piety of the Queen was unlike all others, and called Mary and Philip the Catholic kings. Perhaps the portrait is nothing more but a partner for Philip's Titian, but I believe Mary and perhaps Philip are attempting to become one body, one legislator, one monarch. Images of the couple seem to have been a common occurrence, for another portrait of the couple, dated 1558, can be found in Woburn Abbey, and another dated in 1555. If we examine the Woburn portrait, we see that Mary sits while Philip awkwardly stands. Upon close inspection of the portrait, I suggest that the original design was to have Philip sit, since his pose is at such an awkward angle. But this was later altered, perhaps out of what the symbolism may suggest. Instead, Philip stands while Mary sits. The portrait suggests that Mary is of a high status, since subjects were to stand in front of their monarch unless invited to sit. The protocol remains today. This portrait, though attempting to show an equal partnership, suggests that Philip is yet to be an equal partner. Mary places her hand by her womb, which could suggest her second pregnancy, while two spaniels, which sit between the couple, symbolize their fidelity and companionship with each other. The portrait is of a happily married couple. For compensation, Mary wears Spanish colors to honor her husband and her mother, though the gown she wears is not black, but a dark blue. She combines her personal colors with her husband's. If this portrait was indeed inspired by Moore, it does suggest a question concerning Moore's 1554 portraits. Perhaps the 1554 portrait was also a joint image originally. However, without removing the canvas from its frame, we will never know. However, for the common people, the image of the Queen they would encounter would be via coinage. What is noticeable is that there are two distinct designs for the silver groat, which was around 4p. The first type shows a strong-jawed Roman ruler. Her flowing hair is prominent, and the profile image is easily identifiable. The second design is smaller, and the crown dominates over the head. This second design shows an older queen, and the facial expression seems more human. Mary wears a closed crown, signifying her independent and autocratic power, while her loose hair symbolizes her virginity. On the reverse is her motto, Veritas Temporis Filia, truth is the daughter of time, and the English coat of arms. The motto is prevalent in all of the Marian groats before the marriage. The likeness represents an allusion to Mary. She is not Mary Tudor, but Maria Regina. After Mary's marriage to Philip in 1554, there is a change in iconography in terms of coinage. One observation I wish to comment on now is that the groats did not include Philip's profile. If this was the norm, then I can confidently say that the lower denominations of coinage did not acknowledge Philip in the same way as higher denominations later would, such as the shilling. The furthest inclusion Philip receives is his name. This groat represents an image more akin to a penny. Veritas Temporis Filia was removed, and the couple's joint motto was now included on the coinage. We have made God our helper. The couple made it no secret that they were a joint team and were one dual monarch. Yet the absence of Philip's effigy does suggest unease around the king. Though differing designs for groats show that the government had numerous designs which they could use, or was Mary's image changing at a vast rate? The most common coin was the silver penny. The gown Mary wears is tight-fitting, and the Queen wears a decorated partlet. Though the gown is more decorative and symbolizes a married woman, Mary retains her loose hair, which symbolizes her virginity. Why the loose hair remains after the marriage is not known, but it does suggest that either the mint continued to use the same design, or the Queen was to be presented as a mythical virgin, to reiterate her independence from her husband, despite her married status. This image allowed the common man to dampen any fear that the Queen was subject to her husband, since it would be the only image of the Queen that they would see on the coin. I have chosen this coin as part of my analysis due to the deliberate hole punctured. The near perfection of the hole suggests it was not by natural design nor by accident. The only explanation for such a hole is that the coin was worn around the neck as a necklace or pendant, perhaps by a supporter of Mary. The coin may also have been blessed by the Queen or a priest and used as a sacramental, since the Queen was said to have miraculous healing powers. This would explain its survival, since the owner clearly treasured the coin. Whether Mary fostered this movement to puncture coins is not known, but this coin does show that there were examples of subjects showing their support for their queen in a materialistic way. The individual who punctured this penny may have been inspired by the punching of the gold angel used for the Easter ceremonies. The fact that the hole is not on the face removes any suggestion this was done out of malice, nor does it suggest that the coin was merely punctured and then threaded through as a way to keep the coin safe. The obverse attached to the penny is also significant, for it translates as, Mary, by the grace of God, rose without a form. Though the legend was used by Edward VI and Henry VIII, it made a far more significant connection to the Virgin, since Mary was a woman and her namesake. This direct link with the Holy Virgin, who is referred to as a rose without a thorn in numerous Catholic works, such as the 5th century Latin poet Cornelius Sedulius, who compared Eve with the Virgin in his work Carmen Pascal, allowed Mary to transform herself into England's vessel for liberation and eternal life. As the Virgin gave birth to the Christ child, so Mary planned on leaving a Catholic successor to cement her religious policies. The link between roses and the Virgin continued throughout the Middle Ages, with many artists visualizing the Virgin surrounded by roses, such as Stephen Lochner's Madonna of the Rose Boyer. The contemporary use of the terminology was through Dürer's altarpiece for St. Bartholomew in Venice, painted in 1506, which depicts the Virgin crowning Maximilian I with a crown of roses. Moreover, stories would have been told in the Marian court of the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe, whereby a Mexican inhabitant, Juan Diego, in 1531 encountered the Virgin, which involved Castilian roses. In conjunction with this, John Christopherson's An Exhortation to All Men, published in 1554, made the connection between Mary as God's handmaid and mother to her people. With the printing of this text, the imagery of the Virgin and her connection to the Queen was widespread for the literate. By having this legend of Marian roses visible on the most common denomination, the Marian government had the intention to link the Virgin with the Queen in a way to infiltrate the community, which printed works could not. Every time an individual held the coin, they could make that desirable link between their earthly and heavenly Queen. In 1554, the coinage changed. The first coin became a presentation piece, which you can see in the top corner, and shows the thinking within the mint at accommodating the concept of dual monarchy. The couple were presented on their own, with Mary being on the obverse, Philip on the reverse. It is understandable as to why it was rejected as a possible design there. Presenting Mary on her own was positive, yet by having Philip on the reverse, the coin could be interpreted as Philip having equal power. However, a design was agreed on, and it would resemble the coinage seen under Isabella and Ferdinand, with both monarchs facing each other. If we examine a silver shilling, minted in 1554, we can see that Mary is on the viewer's right and is slightly higher than Philip, indicating her authority over her husband. The only coins to present the king were the silver shilling and silver sixpence, and both types of coin had the same design. Though Philip is presented on the dominant side, Mary's position is secured, since she occupies the same space her mother Isabella took within Spanish coins with Ferdinand, and this portrait type was also present on the coinage of Charles V and his mother Joanna. If we compare the coins, we see Philip, Joanna, and Ferdinand share the space on the left, while Isabella, Charles, and Mary are on the right. Each pair of monarchs had to share their power with dual regnants. By having Mary on the right does not relinquish her status, nor make her submissive to her husband. As Giles Tremlett argues, Isabella of Castile was not submissive to her husband when it came to rule in Castile, and Ferdinand was the junior partner. Whereas Isabella and Ferdinand, and Joanna and Charles are on equal platforms, and both face each other equally, we see that on the silver shilling, Mary is above her husband. The position of Mary cannot signify her as being submissive, since Charles V is on the same side as his cousin and grandmother. Though Charles V shared his position with his mother, Joanna was not seen to be the dominant partner, due to her father and son's attempt at usurping her crown and placing her in the convent of Santa Clara in 1509. What is of note is that the design is reminiscent of Jacopo de Trezzo's medals, which were produced around the same time. Thanks to a letter written by Trezzo to Philip's right-hand man Antonio de Granville on the 21st of December 1554, Trezzo writes to him stating that he is being commissioned to produce all the dies for this kingdom, the kingdom being England. We can be fairly certain that it was Trezzo who designed the later English coinage. Therefore, it was not solely an English privilege to design the coins, but the design was open to foreign skill. Mary and Philip trusted da Trezzo to create an image which could be accepted by the English people. However, not everyone saw this design as a return of the Catholic kings in a glorious fashion. John Hooper's wife, Anne, wrote to her friend, the Swiss reformist Henry Bullinger, and saw the joint coinage as Ahab and Jezebel. This reaction to the coinage is understandable, since Anne had lost her husband in the flames on the 9th of February, 1555. It is not known how others saw the coinage, but this reaction suggests that the coinage did set emotions high. However, as already discussed, Mary did not only rule England. From 1556, after Charles V's abdication, she became Queen of Spain, Flanders, and Spain's other overseas territories. Mary, by right and by marriage, accomplished a feat her father never could. As Philip's wife, she extended English territory in theoretical terms, even as far as the New World and Chile. To understand fully Marian iconography, we have to examine her European image. How did her European subjects view their English queen? This coin, the Flemish copper penny, minted in 1557, is one of these coins shown in Europe. Though at first the effigy seems to follow the English design, there are subtle differences which makes them worthy of comment. The first difference is that Philip is more prominent on the coin. This is understandable since Flanders was his domain. Mary is seen as the consort, and her headdress gown represents that seen on the English penny. This suggests that da Trezzo also created this image. Another difference is that the English imperial crown is not present, but a simple open crown or coronet. Mary does not have the same authority in Flanders as she held in England. The open crown shows papal obedience, while the imperial crown symbolized English freedom from Rome. The third difference between the copper coin and English coinage is that Mary's name is not present on the obverse. Instead, only Philip and his title of King of Spain is given. This does seem to demote Mary, for though Philip was not always present as an effigy on English coinage, at least his name was present. When it comes to the medallic iconography of Mary I, there is only one name which comes to mind: Jacopo da Trezzo. He was in the service to Philip and designed many of the medals depicting the couple. His medals were produced in gold, silver, and bronze, allowing for a variety of individuals to receive one. Medals were used to commemorate rulers and great events. Trezzo was central to the medal's design, and Mary's likeness suggests that he may have had a sit-in with the Queen, since the portraits of More and Ewith do not quite fit the pattern. This gold medal shows Mary as peace, marking her accession and her role as England's saviour. On the reverse is the legend, sight to the blind, rest to the fearful. Mary is portrayed as peace and as a military leader. She burns objects of war and Protestant symbols. Behind peace is the tree of life. With Mary's rule, England will bear fruit. Mary's role as a potential mother is highlighted. As with the Virgin who bore the Messiah, so Mary had the opportunity to bear an English Catholic. Behind her on her left are figures rejoicing in sunlight. They are the faithful who remained with Rome. Mary becomes the cornerstone for a transition from the dark days of heresy with a return to the light of Catholicism. The next medal was designed around the same date of the marriage negotiations, or perhaps as a celebration of the marriage. The reverse depicts union and highlights the need for England to unite with Spain. Union holds a torch between two olive branches in her right hand, while her crown is in her left. The figure walks across a battlefield. Mary's victory is highlighted once again. Mary, through her union with Philip, will preside over a peaceful Europe, a united England and Spain. Though da Trezzo is the artist usually associated with Marian medals, there was another notable medalliist, Giovanni da Cavino. Cavino's medal of Mary, though significant, was not commissioned for the Queen per se. The obverse depicts Julius III. It is a papal medal celebrating the pontiff. The reverse is where we spend our attention. On the legend, England, thou shalt rise again, as now and the last day, focuses on England. And it is significant that the Pope wishes to place emphasis on England for this medal. The medal, minted in Paris, signifies not only Mary's victory, but the papacy's ability to return England to obedience. The figures on the reverse are the key players in England's resurrection. You have the Cardinal, Reginald Pole, on his right, Charles V, Philip's father and Holy Roman Emperor. As Mary's father figure, he gestures to the Pope, who receives England's supplication. While Charles acknowledges the Pope, Philip looks towards his wife. Mary welcomes England's return to obedience. This medal shows Mary pregnant. Her swollen belly seems to move, hence the Queen's hands over it. Perhaps it is a play on words, reminiscing when the Queen met Pole after his exile, whereby the Queen felt her child move as she met her cousin. Mary is the chosen vessel to restore England with her Catholic heir. The medal is one of celebration and relief that England's disobedience has rectified. Jacques Jean Henlink, a Flemish medallist who began his service to the King in 1555 as a royal seal engraver, was inspired by da Trezzo and depicted the busts of the couple. Again, working in gold and silver, the medals do not add any iconographical insights, but the attention to the facial features is exquisite. Though the British Museum date these medals as 1555, it is obvious that the medals were in fact produced in 1556, after Charles V's abdication, since the medal's legend calls Philip King of Spain, Hisp Rex. It is very probable this medal was cast to celebrate Philip and Mary's new roles as King and Queen of Spain. What is interesting to note, in hindsight, is that Mary takes the dominant position. Though it may seem she takes the reverse, in fact she is the obverse. This is thanks to later medals portraying Philip's two later wives, Isabella de Valois from 1559 and Anna of Austria from 1570, whereby the wives are facing right, while Philip faces left. The medals certainly made an impact, for the Victorian Albert Museum hold a boxwood medallion which resembles John Henley's later medal of Mary created around 1555, where a bust portrait copy of Datrezo's work is also located in Paris. Perhaps the boxwood medallion was one of John Henley's initial works before committing to the design in gold and silver, or that the design was created by a Datrezo enthusiast who wished for their own copy of the work. This piece highlights the moldable characteristics medals held. Though Datrezo focused on medals that would be given to foreign courts and perhaps to notable individuals, it may have been possible for a variety of other clientele to encounter the image. The medallion allows one to speculate that the individual was not privileged to receive a gold medal, so commissioned a cheaper alternative. The plaster cast continues this acknowledgement of Datrezo and the evident high regard he was placed within the European medallic tradition. In Europe, windows allowed the Queen to be visualized by her European subjects. Windows formed a public display of loyalty and commemoration from the particular parish for where the window was constructed. It allowed the parish to commemorate their monarchs in allegorical form. The seventh window at St. Jansker's in Gouda is an example of this and depicts an image of Mary which is not usually commented on. The window, created in 1557, primarily shows Philip's place as the new Solomon, while Mary was Judea. The window took 26 months to complete, with initial measurements being taken on the 20th of March, 1557, with the scaffolding dismantled on the 13th of August, 1559. The project cost 420 Carolus guilders. The project, begun due to the need of a new set of windows after a fire in 1552, was headed by the Krabbeth brothers, Voiter and Dirk, who were the leading glass painters in the northern Netherlands. The windows present the Habsburgs as divine rulers. There is an unapologetic mission to remind the local community of their Catholic faith. While the Habsburgs are presented as God's chosen monarchs, Mary and Philip are presented as devout servants. In terms of likeness, Philip was sketched from life. Yet it is curious as to why Mary's coinage or medals were not used by the Krabbeths. Therefore, Mary's image must have been commissioned to portray a thematic view of the Queen. She is seen as youthful, pure, and with her marriage, there is a sense of obedient wife and future mother. The couple are a united front, which neatly fits into the rest of the iconography. As Philip is Solomon, he saves Judea from heresy and rebuilds God's temple. He, with Mary, saved England from the depths of heresy and returned her to Mother Church. This window is seen as a victory over heresy. The symbolic imagery was also seen in St. Barbara in Ghent in 1556 and in Our Lady in Antwerp again in 1556. Though fate assisted with the 1552 fire, Philip and Mary had the opportunity to redecorate the churches in the Low Countries, where they could present their image in a way that suited them. The St. Bavo window, designed by Michel Koksky, depicts the couple at prayer, and from the surviving preparatory vidimus, it seems that the same design was used, or was inspired by the Antwerp window, and by a previous window commissioned by Philip with his first wife, Maria of Portugal. The two monarchs kneel in prayer, Philip in armour, while Mary wears a gown. The Queen seems to face forward, while her husband's gaze is upwards, and Philip wears more ermine than his Queen. The clothing Mary wears does seem to mirror the clothing at Gouda, suggesting that Skotsky was the inspiration for the Krabbeths. The image at Antwerp, which was designed by Cornelius van Daal, emphasizes Mary's female virtues and continues to link the Queen with her namesake. Mary kneels with the Virgin, who is dressed in red and blue. Mary is the new Virgin who will produce the much-awaited Catholic heir. This symbol This window is a symbol that Europe must send her another chance of producing the heir, since her previous attempt had been unsuccessful. The Virgin is Mary's sponsor and protects her, and will intercede on the Queen's behalf. Both monarchs are dressed in gold and are under their own cloth of estate to symbolize their status and their desire to please their lord. The coat of arms of England are shown in the top section of the window and surmounted by the same crown being worn by the Queen. Mary's coat of arms is also present on the table where she rests her hands in prayer. Both Mary and Philip wear high arched closed crowns, which is typical Habsburg iconography, representing monarchs with overseas territories. These are not English crowns, but resemble those seen in the Low Countries. However, Andrea Gaston suggests that the crowns may be Spanish. Thus, Mary is presented as Queen of England and of Spain in this window. This makes sense, since in this window, Mary is not just Queen of England, but of Spain, the Low Countries, and the Spanish Empire. These three windows, commissioned within a similar time frame, show that there was a valid attempt to put across the couple throughout the United Territories in quick succession. Though circumstances assisted with the fire at St. Jansker's, it is surprising that the Low Countries contain such windows, while England does not. Perhaps there was unease or the lack of skill since the Reformation. However, there was a window depicting the Queen as princess with her father and mother in the now lost window in the chapel at Hampton Court Palace. The date of these windows is significant, with two being commissioned in 1556, while the third in 1557. There is clearly a move by Philip and Mary to reassert their right as King and Queen of Charles V's lands. The abdication of the former Holy Roman Emperor occurred in the summer of 1556, meaning the new Isabella and Ferdinand did not waste any time in presenting their image to their European subjects. From these windows, which had financial support from both the King and Queen, demonstrates that the monarchs understood the need to symbolize their rule in somewhat allegorical form. Why Mary's image is not lifelike is a question we may never be able to answer, since, as argued previously, D'Atrezzo's medals and Moore's and Ewer's portraits were situated throughout Europe, and it is reasonable to suggest that the areas of Philip's empire did have access to these other images. It is possible that Van Dyll worked from a basic template of Philip and did not think of using an English or Flemish coin as a reference for Mary. Yet the lack of likeness may simply be Van Dyll and the others presenting an allusion to Mary as the perfect queen, one who did not age and was as virtuous as her namesake. I now turn to a neglected aspect of Mary in England, the law. The law is an element in society which is mysterious. It lurks in the shadows, yet without it society would be chaotic. Whereas the nobility had portraiture, the poor had coinage, the imagery of Mary in legal documents related directly to that middle group in society, the judiciary. A sign of good monarchy was a stable law. How Mary presented herself as a lawful queen is shown in these documents. Usually, authors discuss her 1553 Michaelmas roll on the King's Bench roll as a symbol of Mary's queenship, while the later rolls from Michaelmas 1556 are usually described as a sign that Philip became the dominant partner in the marriage. I will argue that this is too simple of an argument, for the iconography is more complicated than this. The first depiction of Mary as queen on the King's Bench rolls by the limner Livina Terlink depicts Mary enthroned and victorious. A gold cloth of estate hangs behind her as if it was being held from heaven. On the Queen's right shows Mary with two angels proclaiming to her that she is now queen. Mary has her hands in prayer, accepting the position God has placed her. Holding the sword of state in her raised right hand, Mary is a warrior queen. The sword famously symbolized the monarch's role as a military leader. Mary sits with the imperial crown, a symbol of direct authority of church and state. Mary is presented as the legitimate heir. She wears her hair loose, symbolizing her virginity, and a reference to her namesake. In this moment, Mary becomes a queen and a wife. She has married her people, and like a protective mother of her newly born, she has saved them from the dangers that surround them. Above the queen, a dove, a symbol of the Holy Spirit. Mary has been divinely appointed as queen. The 1554 Michaelmas roll is the first to depict the newlyweds. Mary holds her coronation regalia in the usual style, while Philip wields a sword. Philip is in a subordinate position. He looks to his wife, whom he receives his power. With Mary holding the king's scepter, she is in the dominant position, for the scepter symbolized temporal power, while the sword only had a militaristic symbolism. The P is richly decorated in blue and gold, both royal colours. This may symbolize the union of Mary and Philip, with her blue and Spanish gold. The green cloth of estate is embroidered with golden M's and P's, and is floral, symbolizing their marriage and the hope of an heir. The figures of the couple are unique. Mary's image has not altered from the previous design. This is evident via the inclusion of the loose hair that showed her virginity. Clearly, this was problematic, since she was now married, though the loose hair may simply be the product of copying the earlier image. Yet why would this have been accepted? Mary may have been married to her husband, but she was first married to her country, and her promise to her nation to remain England's servant is symbolized through the loose hair. Philip looks towards Mary with loving eyes, and his face-to-body proportion is more lifelike. Mary holds her coronation regalia in the usual style, while Philip wields a sword. After examining this image, Judith Richards saw the inclusion of Philip as an expression of shared royal authority, and the inclusion of the sword symbolized Philip's role in being judge and warrior. His great-grandmother, Isabella, used the same iconography. Though Richard makes a valid argument with the sword symbolizing Philip's place in England, this is a basic reading. As previously discussed, Mary only held the sword in the 1553 role to show herself as a military leader. There was no need for her to be portrayed with it again, since she was now the undisputed queen. Since she was now married to Philip, he could take on the role of military leader, since that was what was expected. According to the Liber Regalis, after the coronation of the sovereign, the consort would be enthroned on the monarch's left. By having Philip placed on the consort's position, his subordinate position is emphasized. With Mary holding the king's scepter, she is in the dominant position, for the scepter symbolized temporal power, while the sword only had militaristic symbolism. Though Philip is dressed in gold robes, this could be a symbol of his Spanish blood, his wealth, or of the hope of a coronation. Mary, on the other hand, is in her red robes, which was the colour of ultimate power and authority. The red gown is a symbol of her parliamentary role, for she is a parliamentary monarch. The inclusion of the ermine promotes this sense of authority and status, since only the most powerful could wear such garments. From 1555, a new design for the King's Bench rolls was created. As seen in these later rolls, Mary now wears a French hood and looks to Philip. She is now a married queen. The hood symbolizes her married state, which can be found in the Book of Ruth, yet her body is from the same pattern as the previous rolls. Mary's high position in the portrait indicates her higher station. These are one of the first few rolls to include Mary and Philip with a single crown between them. The Michaelmas term roll in 1556 showed a couple in a new position. It has been argued by Anna Whitelock that this reversal was to please Philip, since he was now portrayed in the dominant position. However, as previously argued, this is a very simple and somewhat naive suggestion, because Philip was not present in England and is somewhat unrealistic that he would care about an image on a court roll when he had matters in his own territories to deal with. There is a clear difference in the art style compared to the previous rolls. The likeness is more realistic. The couple are equal standing and a crown hovers above between them. They are both dressed in the same robes, but Philip wears ermine, while Mary's is plain. Though Philip holds his sword, Mary too has altered her style and holds her scepter in her right hand to mirror Philip's. This was primarily done to counteract with Philip's dominant position. Yet Mary is the only figure holding the scepter, thus she is still the dominant partner in terms of English regality. The position of Philip is due to his accession of the Habsburg Empire. Though Mary equaled him, being the Queen of England could not be seen as more significant than Philip's empire. However, as can be seen on the right, not all charters followed this new position. A charter to the Borough of Launceston, dated the 15th of February 1557, depicts the monarchs in their original position. Mary continues to be placed on the dominant side while wielding the king's scepter. The final form of imagery I wish to discuss is the Great Seal. When it came to documentation, the importance of a letter or document was understood with the inclusion of the seal attached. A grant or appointment was invalid without it. The seal was the monarch's confirmation. The word seal comes from the Latin sigilla, which itself derives from signum, to mean a mark or sign. J.L. Campbell describes best the significance of the Great Seal in his Lives of the Lord Chancellor, where he states, "It is considered the emblem of sovereignty, the clavis regni, the only instrument by which on solemn occasions the will of the sovereign can be expressed. Absolute faith is universally given to every document purporting to be under the Great Seal, as having been duly sealed with it by the authority of the sovereign." Mary began her reign by using her brother's seal. This was due to the practicalities of creating a new one and setting it into wax. The mold itself was usually made from latten, silver, bronze, or gilded copper. Though the cost of Mary's seal was unknown, a warrant dated the 1st of September 1547, granted to Henry Caldwell, a London goldsmith, states that it cost £42 7 shillings 6 to create a new seal for Edward VI, which weighed 37 ounces, and a privy seal for the Duchy of Lancaster. The Great Seal itself cost £8 10, while the graving of the item costs 10 marks. By the 1st of January 1554, a new Great Seal for Mary had been created, since this was first used on the marriage treaty with Prince Philip. It is significant that this seems to be the first surviving seal depicting Mary. She wears her coronation gown and regalia as fitting to her station. On the obverse, the Queen is on horseback with fleur-de-lis and loose hair. The horse is in a trotting motion, symbolizing calm, peace, and stability. This was a key message in Mary's first months as Queen, after the turbulent years of her brother's rule and the crisis which occurred after his death. Mary's queenship was to calm the storm and return England to its merry Catholic past. The cloth she sits on depicts castles representing Castile, while pomegranates represent Aragon. Her Spanish heritage is symbolized. The first use of this seal was for a marriage treaty, dated January 1554. Conversations concerning a new seal to depict the king were only discussed on the 20th of May 1555, and it was not until 1556 when Anthony Derrick was commissioned to create this said seal. As you can see, the image echoes that of the king's bench rolls. Philip is in the dominant position, yet both are crowned and share the orb. They are one body, king and queen, man and woman. They are one monarch. This seal probably created due to the accession of Philip as King of Spain in 1556. The joint seal of Mary and Philip, which was attached to a grant to Reginald Pole, dated the 14th of June 1557, which is the seal you can see here, is the first one I have found which follows the council's decision made the previous year to make a new seal. Therefore, it's been 2 years since first discussions began. The obverse shows Philip in the dominant position. Both wear individual crowns and wear the same garments. There's a crowned rose or coat of arms between them, while both place their hands on an orb. The orb is placed upon a pillar which depicts a crown above a united P and M. The seal also includes the joint titles of the couple. The design has been followed to the letter. The reverse shows both monarchs on horseback. Though Michaela Baker argued that Philip is more prominent and by having Mary slightly hidden, showing her as a consort, I disagree. Mary is in front of Philip, and while her horse faces forward, Philip's horse bows, suggesting a mark of reverence to Mary. The Queen turns to her husband, symbolizing a sharing of power. Yet she continues to hold the scepter, and Philip, holding the sword, looks towards that scepter and his wife. This shows that Mary still maintained her dominance. Behind them is their joint coat of arms, with a crown above which symbolizes their empire. However, by 1558, a new seal was envisioned. The seal shows Maria Regina in all her glory. She wears the imperial crown under a cloth of estate. This shows Mary as her most powerful. She is secure on her throne. She is both queen, mother, and virgin. She holds the scepter in her right hand, the orb in her left, recreating her position when she was crowned. She sits alone in imperial glory. She is England's Judith. She is empress of her realm and by marriage of Habsburg Europe. Sitting with her, acting as guards, are two sphinxes. The symbolism cannot be ignored. From an ancient Greek, Sphinx guarded the city of Thebes. By having Mary guarded by Sphinx, Mary is protected from her enemies. She is a heavenly queen without a male to chain her power. The design of this type of Sphinx, whereby the human female wears eardrops and pearls, can be seen in La Granja in Spain. Again, a Spanish link. Perhaps Mary is impersonating the mythical legend of her grandmother Isabella Castile in this moment of triumph. 1558 saw the religious legislation paying with results, with the number of burnings decreasing. England was returning to the true faith, and Mary thought she was with child. Her hard work was finally being rewarded by God. Sphinxes are also protectors of rightful inheritance and truth. Therefore, Mary in this image is portraying herself as the legitimate English queen. This seal is everything Mary's queenship represents, in terms of royal status and power, and yet it also hints at motherhood. Mary is England's mother and has fulfilled on her promise she gave at the Guildhall speech in 1554. Though not remembered for a visual representation, this short discussion proves that Mary's image was present throughout Europe and had grasped the idea of iconography and moulded English queenship in her image. She can no longer be seen as a backwards monarch who did not understand art. The queen was a bringer of peace and stability, which was welcomed after the turbulent years of her father and brother. Tresors medals of the royal couple again display the new Isabella and Ferdinand. They are a united front to rival their grandparents. Their union was blessed and forthcoming, the perfect couple to unite a warring Europe. If the Queen had a child, which was suggested in the papal medal and in the numerous artworks, then this allusion to a divinely appointed union would have been cemented. Through the designs of Derrick, da Trezzo, Moore, and Ewerth, Mary I orchestrated an image of queenship which highlighted both her virginity while also claiming her independence from her husband. This seal, if it had been used, would have symbolized everything she had achieved in such a short time. This seal shows Mary as maiden, mother, and as majesty. Thank you very much.
All right. Well done. Thank you very much. I don't know whether we've unmuted now. Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Well done. Excellent. Wow, it's an amazing talk. I have been amazed by it. I didn't know enough about her at all, or her imagery and so on. I've learned a great deal. I've been jotting things down so I don't forget them. It's quite incredible. The amount of information, amount of research that you put into that is quite incredible, really. I mean, I've learned a lot of things from the paintings that you've shown and the imagery and so on. You know, the symbolism of the rose without a thorn, the link with the Virgin Mary, clearly very important there. Linked with Our Lady of Guadalupe, I hadn't worked that one out before, but that's another interesting link there actually that I'd never actually considered before. And lots of Catholic symbolism and symbolism of peace as well is clearly, you know, de Trezzo is trying to get that across. I think the symbolism of peace, and when you think about the terrible times during Henry VIII and Edward, and the complete anarchy really at times of their reign and the chaos, she represented peace and stability, which is what the England sorely needed, really, which I thought was great. But I think one thing that's really fascinating is that she was a role model for women. You know, she had such power and authority and symbolism in the art at a time when women had so little power, both material and in every sense, that their money was owned by, controlled by men, fathers, husbands, and that type of thing. Women had little say in anything. And there's this woman on the throne with the scepter and the orb and so on, radiating power. She's a role model for women. I think I'm very much in favor of women having a much more higher profile in history. And I think Mary is an amazing one. We're going to have another talk on Mary in January, I believe, as well, which should give some more information about it. But absolutely fascinating, really. So if anybody would like to put a question into the box, I can put it to Peter, perhaps. And we got some good comments there. Fascinating, great talk, excellent. I think this kind of tells you everything, really. Yeah. Comment here about, I don't know, I haven't made this connection before. Have you looked at the panels at the Westgate Museum in Winchester? created for Mary and Philip's wedding. I don't know whether you
Yes,
know.
no, Joe, I think we discussed it about 2 years ago, so I do still need to go to that. And no, they're fascinating. They really are. And no, thank you, Tim, for all the comments. It's it's remarkable that we normally think of Elizabeth I as this great queen of iconography and Virgin Mother, Virgin Queen. Well,
Yeah,
she learnt it from her sister. As
yeah.
that last seal shows, Mary knew exactly what she was doing. Her
So was
mother
it
was
about PR really? Was it what we'd call PR, I suppose?
exactly no. If Mary had just if the reign had lasted maybe a few years later, who knows what we could have seen. It's absolutely incredible.
But a lot of people's memory of her is coloured by what happened afterwards with Elizabeth and people
Mm,
who were basically out to destroy her reputation and damage
exactly.
her, tarnish her in every way they can. I mean, this has been rectified by Eamon Duffy, for example, in Fires of Faith, which I think is a fascinating book, really, really rectifying the whole story of Mary and Mary's reign and the amazing progress that was made during her reign and the changes and things like that, and with Cardinal Pole as well, to the church. It's really coming out now, thank goodness,
Mm,
the reality of what Mary was really like. And, instead of all this story about burning people and all that sort of thing, there's an awful lot more to the story. You can't excuse that sort of thing, but that's a small part of the story. There's so much
mm,
more. Let's see if there's
yes.
anything else. Somebody else has put pomegranate has links to the Passion, apparently, and represents the church.
Mm.
Certainly represents Catherine of Aragon, doesn't it? I think.
Certainly, she used the pomegranate on purpose to have that link between her mother and also to her grandmother, Isabella, because that's where it originates from Granada.
Mm.
There's that link between two very powerful women. And, we always think, oh, Mary didn't have the education to be queen. Yes, she did. She had her mother and her grandmother as examples of that queenship to prove that women could rule.
And Catherine of Aragon, in the last document she ever signed, actually legal document, she signed it as the Queen.
Yes.
So she wasn't giving up on the idea that she was the rightful and real Queen.
Mm.
And no doubt Mary had the same view, I expect, for
Yes,
obvious.
well, in all of Mary's correspondence, she always signs herself Mary the Queen. So it reiterates that fact. It's not just she doesn't write Maria Rex or Maria Regina. She says the Queen, which sometimes has more power than the Latin.
Well, it's basically making the point, I'm the Queen, that's it. It's not
Exactly,
negotiable kind of
exactly.
thing.
It's the same way her mother and grandmother signed. So there's
Yeah.
that again that direct link with Isabella Castile.
Yes, because her mother signed it in English, the Queen,
Mm.
and a last legal document that she signed. So she clearly, was quite keen on getting the message across to people, and it's completely, without any mistake whatsoever, what her view was on that subject, that she was the legitimate queen, and anybody else came afterwards was not. And obviously, the
Yes.
children of the next marriages of Henry as well, therefore, would not be legitimate in her view, or some other people's views as well.
Yes. No.
I don't think there's any other questions that that anybody's. I can't see any more questions that are there. If anybody wants to put in, sorry about the coughing. Any more questions at all? I thought
one
one
from Arthur Hallett West.
Okay.
Yes. No. I'm just looking, Arthur. I'm just seeing if there is any evidence. I don't believe there is. I may be mistaken, but I'm sure Joe and many other Marian scholars. I will keep this question in mind and I will ask them. Because we know Talis was, he did have Catholic sympathies, and Mary did like his stuff. So there may be. We don't really know a lot about Mary and Talis' relationship.
Although, as you said, she adopted the imagery of Judith,
Mm,
and the text of Speminalium is from Judith, which is an apocryphal text
yes.
for the reformers. So it would seem to be
Yes.
an unlikely candidate, the subject matter for some
Yes.
plays of Elizabeth.
Well, I've just seen here it may have been composed in 1556. So yes, you're right. It may very well have been composed for Mary to begin with, and later altered for Elizabeth.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Brilliant. Okay, I've got a question here. Have you come across any other interesting symbolic iconography like the pomegranates? I'm not quite sure.
Yes, no, I know what Jessica. I mean, the pomegranate is the main symbol that she uses, and obviously, all like
Yes.
the Virgin Mary links and the roses and that sort of thing. Um, it's quite interesting actually that her seal has the fleur de lis, because obviously at this point, English kings and queens still claimed France. But you also have that link with the Virgin again, with the fleur de lis, and that's linked. So the fleur de lis may be again, a joint meaning. You got obviously her as Queen of France, but also as that Virgin Queen, that Virgin Mary. But yeah, no, I don't think there's a lot more iconography. I mean, again, there's other scholars who really go into this detail, and I know Emma Cahill-Maron certainly looks at this, and in her great work. But the pomegranates were the main, because that's what people would have recognized.
Okay. I thought something was interesting about the image of Mary enthroned from Michaelmas 1553 on the throne. And that reminded me of the iconography of Our Lady of Walsingham on the Great Seal of the Priory there.
Yes.
And then that links back to the original statue, because the one in the V&A, the Langham Madonna, the one I've written an article on previously, the ECHA, dates from the 13th century. So what's in the V&A, of course, is not complete, because the seat throne, whatever it was that was on, is not there, but you can see that it was attached. But you can see the medieval imagery of the woman on the throne. So you've got the link between Our Lady of Walsingham, which is clearly a very, very familiar image to Catholics, right up, even though the statue disappeared, inverted commas, may have been burned, but may well not have been, because I don't think it was. But you've got that, people would have been familiar with that imagery that of the throne and the woman on the throne. I think that's a great link with Our Lady and the medieval imagery.
Yes, no, I mean, I didn't even put that. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're completely right, and that that really hammers the point here that she's using not only her namesake, she's using her position as a woman to show that, to show England. I mean, England is the Virgin's dowry. She is showing I am the new Virgin Mary.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a great analogy, really. That struck me as quite forcefully there. That was in their mind. They would have seen woman on the throne, Our Lady of Walsingham, Queen Mary on the throne. Visual connection straight away. It would have chimed with them straight away. That would have, they would have got that imagery straight away. I mean, at the time when so many people were illiterate or semi-illiterate, then all this imagery would have meant so much. This is why they're actually showing images and of all sorts of things. And the stained glass windows, of course, they would have been very important, because a lot of them got smashed under Edward. And then to have new windows with new iconography must have been really, really important to people, actually, at a time when they'd been smashed by iconoclastic zealots and so on.
Yes.
And I think the stained glass window at Gouda in the Netherlands as well was really interesting as well. Crabeth one. I thought that was interesting. They must have been fabulously expensive things. Fabulously expensive.
Oh yes. No, I'm trying to work out how much 420 Carolus guilders are, but it is quite an expensive project from what I've heard. And the window is 20 meters high. I've not seen it in the flesh, but I've seen images of it. It's ginormous. It really is.
Interesting, good to see it. I haven't been to Gouda myself, but
no, it's just such a shame that we don't have any things of that scale in England. But that's obviously due to Edward and later Cromwell and the Zealots, which is why the Hampton Court one doesn't survive, which is a real shame.
It is, isn't it? There'd be so much more imagery, so much more of that if it hadn't been for the destructive tendencies of certain people. Any other questions anybody would like to ask? Somebody's put here, Mary grew up in Bewley Palace next to Havering Palace in Essex, Queen Catherine's country seat. Catherine taught her Latin and other subjects until 1529, when Mary was 13. So, I mean, to be educated, you had to be educated in Latin, really. So she was presumably fluent in Spanish. I don't know how many languages she did
Yes,
speak.
so obviously she knew English, Latin, French. They are the main three. She understood Spanish, and I think she could speak it briefly. and she understood Italian as well. So that's 5 languages.
Wow.
Perfect for a queen.
Amazing, isn't it? Because Elizabeth also was supposed to be very conversant in different languages as well, similar
Yes.
or more. I
It
don't
was
know.
the same languages, I believe. I don't.
Because
Apart from
it
Spain.
might have been Elizabeth was trying to sort of say, I can outdo anything my sister can do, I can do, or I can do it better, kind of type of thing. You know, kind of sibling rivalry, maybe. I
What
don't know.
she did, I did better. Exactly. It's remarkable. Really, and and we have to remember that famous portrait of Elizabeth in the coronation gown. That's Mary's. She uses her sister's coronation gown, and
So,
everyone,
so she's actually taking the symbolism and the imagery from her sister and actually reusing it to say, hey, look at me, you know, I'm now the new one. That was the other one, that was the old one, this is the real one.
Exactly.
Kind of, perhaps. It's very interesting. You can't understand Elizabeth without understanding Mary first. It seems to me that the two have to be studied together and have to be looked at carefully. And, you know, in the light of all these things that have come out in the last few years, absolutely fascinating, really. Any other questions anybody would like to ask before we finish off? So we seem to have gone on quite a long time, but absolutely fascinating talk. Anybody want to ask any? If you want to unmute, you could ask a question. No more questions. Somebody else, but thanks for a wonderful talk, Peter. Bravo, wonderful presentation. I think, wow, you're going to be, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, amazing things. It's probable that our viewpoint is both of both Mary and Elizabeth have been coloured by religious political agendas in the work of Strype and Haynes. I think there's an awful lot of stuff has been written by people very biased until fairly recent times, certainly the last 30 years anyway, extremely biased.
Yes, Mel. I mean, short answer, yes. You
Yes.
know, if we talk about those Victorian men who didn't like women, they absolutely hated Mary because she was a Catholic. And we have to remember the whole sobriquet of Bloody Mary only comes into fashion during James II's reign,
Yes.
when you have that fear, oh, we have a Catholic monarch again. And that's when the term Bloody Mary begins. But thankfully, it's on the verge of disappearing, thanks to a lot of new work by my colleagues, which I've mentioned before.
Yeah.
So
And
hopefully, one day we'll be able to remove Bloody Mary from Mary I.
Well, I think it should be challenged if people come out with it, and you do see it on the internet. So people go, "Oh yeah, Bloody Mary." Well, if you challenge it and say, "Well, yes, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's a great deal more." It's a simplistic little slogan doesn't actually help anybody. Doesn't actually help us to understand her or anything.
Exactly.
Else.
I've had many conversations with those sorts of people, and
sure
hopefully convert them.
Well, I'm sure we're all converted this evening anyway. We're all fascinated. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Peter, for a wonderful talk. Absolutely fantastic. And do come back another time to do another talk. You know, it would be absolutely brilliant. So I'd like to say thank you. Angie, do you want to say anything?